Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Medical Board of California's interim board meeting. Pursuant to the provision of Governor Gavin Newsom's Executive Order N29-20, dated March 17th, 2020, this meeting is being conducted via WebEx. Public comments will be heard for Agenda Item 2 for individuals wishing to do so. In order to be ready for public comment, we ask that you please ensure that your comments can be heard clearly by connecting to the audio of this meeting through the proper method. If you are having difficulty hearing the audio of this meeting, it could be because the device you are connecting with has bandwidth limitations. If you do have difficulty hearing the audio of this meeting using your device's audio, please click the ellipsis button at the bottom of the WebEx application or the Communicate menu item at the top of the WebEx application, and then select Audio Connection. You will see an option to call in and will be provided with a telephone number, access code, and attendee ID that can be used to connect to the meeting audio via phone. Using the information provided, it will automatically disconnect your device's audio and connect your phone to the name you joined the meeting with. By using this method, if you are having audio problems with your device, this will allow you to still participate and hear the audio of the board meeting. Please see the instructions on how to connect link on the last page of the meeting agenda for step-by-step WebEx instructions, including screenshots. Thank you, President Lawson. You can now start the meeting.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to the board members and to the members of the public for your patience as we start this meeting here at 5:15. I would like to ask all of the board members to please turn your cell phones or any other devices to silent so there are no inadvertent distractions during this meeting. Since this meeting is being conducted via WebEx, I will ask all board members and speakers to please identify yourselves by name before speaking for clarity of the official record. All board members are able to unmute themselves to speak during the meeting, but please do place yourselves back on mute when not speaking to reduce the background noise for all participants. Following this online meeting etiquette will ensure the best audio quality for everyone. During each call for comments from board members and speakers, we will ensure that all comments can be accommodated, that all comments that can be accommodated are heard before proceeding with the agenda. Government Code Section 11126.5 does allow a board to remove people who willfully interrupt a meeting and to clear the room or virtual space if order cannot be restored by removing or muting the disruptive people. The board does welcome public comments on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comments prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. During each agenda item, the host moderating this WebEx event will activate the Q&A feature of WebEx and will ask anyone wishing to make a public comment to indicate so by replying yes. The host will then call on individuals who indicated they wish to make public comments by name. When called upon, the host will unmute the microphone of the individual and they will have 3 minutes to make their public comments. The host will audibly announce when the 15 seconds remain to conclude the public comment. After 3 minutes have lapsed, the individual will be placed back on mute. And only one public comment per agenda item is allowed per attendee. As Sean mentioned, please do see page 2 of the agenda for WebEx instructions on how to connect from the link on the agenda and additional instructions. During public comment on agenda items, 20 minutes will be allowed for the comment period. After 20 minutes, no further comments will be accepted, and each person will be limited to 3 minutes per agenda item. And the board's IT staff will assist me in receiving those public comments via WebEx during this meeting. I do want to remind all speakers to please stay on topic. Our topic this evening is limited, and to keep your comments to the allotted time or less. Today's meeting will be run in accordance with the Open Meeting Act as required by law, and we plan to end today by 7 p.m. I would like to now call the meeting to order at 5:18 p.m. and ask that board members please unmute their computers. Ms. Caldwell, please call the roll.
Mr. Brooks, Ms. Campaverde, Dr. Gonadev,
Here.
Dr. Hawkins, Dr. Kraus,
Here.
Ms. Lawson,
Here.
Dr. Lewis, Ms. Lubiana, Dr. Mahmood,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Present.
Dr. Thorpe,
Here.
Mr. Watkins,
Present.
Dr. Yip.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. A quorum is present. Board members, please remute your computers. I would like to remind the members again that we will be taking a roll call vote on all action items. We will now move on to agenda item 2, discussion and possible action on interpretation of a requirement for 36 months of approved postgraduate training with 24 continuous months in the same program to qualify for a physician and surgeon certificate. Ms. O'Connor.
Thank you, President Lawson, and good evening, board members. Prior to January 1, 2020, domestic medical school graduates were required to complete 1 year of accredited postgraduate training, and international medical school graduates were required to complete 2 years of accredited postgraduate training. SB 798 changed the postgraduate training requirements so that all medical school graduates, regardless of whether they graduated from a domestic or international school, have to complete 36 months of board-approved postgraduate training, including 24 months in the same program. The board believed that 3 years of postgraduate training was necessary to ensure a physician completed their residency program before practicing independently with a physician's and surgeon's license. Currently, specialty boards under the American Board of Medical Specialties establish how much leave a resident may take without making up the time in order to qualify for board certification. Each postgraduate training program establishes their own leave policies in accordance with these specialty board leave policies. Applicants for a physician's and surgeon's license may have taken approved time off during their residency without being required to make it up in accordance with their program's leave policy, which may result in less than 36 months of postgraduate training completed. Board staff have addressed some of these applications through the Application Review and Special Programs Committee, which has recommended on a case-by-case basis to accept an applicant's training as meeting licensure requirements based on the program director verifying completion of training over a 36-month period. Staff recommends accepting an applicant's program director's attestation that the applicant has received credit for 36 months of postgraduate training with at least 24 months in the same program as meeting the requirements for a physician's and surgeon's license under BPC Section 2065E, regardless of time spent on leave or vacation. And be happy to answer any questions the members may have.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor. Are there any questions from board members?
Ms. Lawson, this is Dr. Thorpe.
Dr. Thorpe, please.
So, Ms. O'Connor, I do have a couple of questions. It seems to me that there are, there's a lot of concern from the programs throughout the state of California about this our current approach to the training requirements for complete licensure for a number of reasons. One of them is related to being able to sign death certificates and documents of extreme interest for these physicians in training. Part of it is also because of the difficulty in those doctors in training supplementing the physician workforce in the state of California, especially to medically indigent clinics or programs where they can, quote, moonlight to get some additional training, get some additional revenue during their training. Many of these physicians are significantly in debt and need the additional revenue. But more concerning is the concerns about this particular issue that is being addressed today. Part of it is this issue about people who take leave during their training program for various issues, whether it's being ill, taking care of an ill family member, or most commonly for women in medical training who now comprise more than 50% of medical school graduates. Many of them, by the time they get into a training program, have come to the point that they want to start a family and will take leave for the purpose of having a baby. In addition, there's another problem that we really haven't addressed here, and that problem is that there is a delay when the patient has when the physician applicant applies for a medical board license. There is a significant delay in getting the license, to the point that if they get a full license, say January, if they're eligible for a full license January 30th, 2021, it's going to take a number of months, sometimes several months, for them to get a completed physician license. And then when they get that, many of them will have to then apply for medical staff privileges, which takes an additional period of time. Sometimes it's hard to know, but the combination of both could be as long as 6 months, could be sometimes longer than that, but clearly creates a vacuum for, number one, these physicians are ready to go to work on day one and yet won't be able to work for, at least 4 to 6 months after they complete their training program, which is, in my view, a waste of resources and is very frustrating for doctors who are finishing their training deeply in debt and want to go to work to start working as qualified physicians. An unintended consequence of this is many of these doctors can get licensed in other states where the requirement is only 2 years to get a full license. So whereas they have to wait for a period of time after they complete their program to go to work in California, they could go to work immediately in Arizona or Nevada or some other state and thus drain the people that we've trained in California from the obvious physician shortage that's in California, and they would be drained to another place where they will establish a residence, raise their children, and probably have a long-term commitment. So to me, there's this particular workaround addresses the issue of an unusual amount or an amount of valid time taken off during the training program that would maybe not as much as 30, that would not allow them to complete the whole 36 months of training unless you get an extension in their program. This does do that, but it doesn't address the more serious problem, in my view, of losing these doctors to other states because they need to go to work on day one after their license is completed. So that my question, I guess, is that what are other states doing that are allowing them to have to allow them to fully license an applicant in 2 years as opposed to 3 years, since the 3 years creates this significant vacuum in people being able to go to work after they complete their training program.
So as far as, the other states, I know we've spoken to a couple folks, and I know Carrie's talked to Nevada, and I'm not sure if Reggie's talked to any others, but they're, as far as the moonlighting issue, I believe some states don't allow moonlighting outside of their program or facilities affiliated with their program. So it's that the moonlighting's issue is a non-issue in some of those states. As far as the gap, between completing 36 months of training and when the license is issued and the credentialing process, I don't want to speak for Reggie, but I believe he had, experience from Oklahoma. They had a different approach. And I believe it was maybe some type of temporary licensure, but I don't know if Carrie, you had any other experience or knowledge of the other states maybe you talked to.
Sure. The licensing requirement varies from 1 year to 3 years, with one state requiring successful completion of a postgraduate training program to qualify for licensure. And the board made a decision during the prior sunset period that 1 year and 2 year of postgraduate training requirement for licensure was not sufficient for consumer protection, and so made the change to require 3 years for all applicants, and in doing so also eliminated the requirement for the board to review and approve medical schools, which then opened up opportunity for more people. And I do want to remind the members, I know that there is a lot to this, but what has been agendized is to address this LEAF program. and to allow the board to make a policy adjustment and clarification so that individuals who take leave but whose program directors attest that they've received at least 36 months of approved postgraduate training with 24 months in the same program, that they've received that credit, will then qualify for licensure. So that's the issue that's been agendized, and that's what we need to address in this board meeting.
Ms. Howard,
Thank
may
you,
I
Ms.
speak?
Webb. Please.
This is Howard
Dr. Kraus.
Kraus. I appreciate Cherry's point, and although there's much to discuss with relation to postgraduate training and licensure, for the sake of focus and direction of our discussion, I would like to make a motion that we authorize staff to accept attestations from an applicant's program director or directors indicating that an applicant for a physician's and surgeon's license has been granted credit for at least 36 months of approved postgraduate training with at least 24 continuous months in the same program as meeting the postgraduate training requirements to qualify for licensure, regardless of time taken for leave or vacation, without extending time for training. And I'd like to speak to that if it's seconded.
I'll second it, Dr. Hawkins, and I'm here. Sorry for the delay.
So this
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins.
This gets to the point of concern, which is significant regarding our 36-month requirement, which taken literally would necessitate some people who have in earnest completed a 3-year postgraduate training program, which qualifies them for board certification, but would not have otherwise met the requirements for licensure in California. So this gives them those, allows them to meet those requirements. Regarding the time from completion of program to licensure, I agree completely with Dr. Thorpe's comments that we don't want every California trained physician to migrate out of the state to look for jobs elsewhere. But I would hope that our staff could find a workaround for that, to have an application ready for processing so that upon the date of completion, there would be an efficient licensure without physicians needing to seek employment out of state. But for purposes of this meeting, I think it's important that we discuss and approve the motion that's now on the table. Thank you.
Dr. Mahmood, can I speak?
Thanks, Dr. Mahmood.
Yeah. I just want to stress on the point that once somebody completes the requirement, should be right away eligible for the license. And I think that process can be done, that if you have a letter from the program where candidate is enrolled, we should give them a choice to be able to apply for license either 3 months or 60 days, and everything should be completed. And only thing would be left is the day he completes it, board gets a notification and he gets the license next day. And I think that should not be a problem at all. That should be very easily solvable. Number one. Number two, I think California has been a leader. We are not going to be looking at the states why they are giving the licenses people with training of 1 year or 2 years. We know that in 1 year or 2 years, you don't get enough experience to go independently practice. And our full responsibility is protection and security of Californians. And I strongly believe that 1 year of training or 2 years of training doesn't make you eligible safely to treat those people independently. And we should stick to our requirement of 3 years training and 24 months consecutive training with all of the requirements. But obviously, the day they complete their training, next day they should have a license in their hand if there is nothing else against them or anything else needs to be verified. So that period should actually be able to verified on the day. Usually programs training ends on June 30th, and by June 30th we should have July 1st they should have a license. They should not have to think about moving to different state or not be able to work, not be able to pay their bills. And I think board should not, we should definitely be able to work around that. And we should make our effort and all the resources we should bring up to that so that people are given, people don't have to take a time off or go away just because they're waiting for the license. So.
Dr. Hawkins, can I speak?
Please,
Just
Dr. Hawkins.
Just to ditto what Dr. Mahmood said, I'm not going to repeat it. I agree with everything he said.
Thank you. Additional comments, questions from board members before I take comments from the public?
Dr. Ganadev, I think there are a lot more issues than, but today's issue, like Ms. Webb pointed out, what we can do is today is actually this is a policy issue. We're not changing the statute. We have to change the law to do anything else. And there are good reasons why I support what Dr. Thorpe said. But right now, I support the policy change where the satisfaction by by agreement by the program director that they did finish 3 years of program, even if they took leave. And that's all we can do now. We're not talking about changing the law. And I think last meeting I wanted this to be brought to the next discussion, next meeting. So maybe we can talk about that, because there are a lot of other people looking into this too, not just the medical board, because there are some issues which I wish it could be as simple as Dr. Mahmood said, that we can get licensed next day, and then it will take 3 months to get the privileges in a hospital. So there are issues, but I think right now, I think I solidly support what our staff is asking for, because that will take care of one small part of primary care docs who took leave of absence mostly related to family issues.
Thank you. Additional board member comments or questions? All right, hearing none. Sean, oh, sorry, Dr. Thorpe.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a follow-up. And I recognize the importance of getting the board's business done, but there is a real problem that we're just sort of blinking an eye at here. There are thousands of doctors who are finishing a primary care training program in a couple of weeks that are going to have significant obstacles to being able to go to work. They're well trained. They haven't had any problems during their training program, but they're not going to be able to get hospital privileges because they can't get a license, and they're going to have that delay for a number of months. And that is in part the result of the lack of foresight of this board when they made recommendations for the legislation that called this all into question. I understand the importance of being well trained and protecting the public, but protecting the public also means that there's a workforce to actually be there to provide care. And today we're having more doctors retire earlier than ever, and we have young doctors ready to go to work that are well trained but can't go to work because of frankly the incompetence of this board. And that concerns me greatly. And I think it's really appalling that we turn a blind eye to this problem. I realize that it's not the agenda item today, and I realize we can't change legislation, but it's gotten to this point now. It's been years since the legislation was passed. Nobody saw this coming, or at least didn't pay attention to it until just the last few months. And now we can't do anything about it. I think it's really unfortunate, because it really puts the public at risk for lack of and the risk of losing doctors. This is a real problem. It's not an imaginary problem. It's a real problem. The doctors are going to go someplace else because they can't get a license here in California. I just want to go on record as expressing my frustration about this. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Thorpe. I think you've made your frustration clear, and I just wanted to provide some context as to why we brought this agenda item in the way that we did, seeking this policy direction from the board. It's because this is the issue that the Application Review and Special Programs Committee has been grappling with. We've seen special requests from physicians seeking to be licensed on this exact point. I think, if memory serves me correct, we had 5 or 6 at our last meeting, and we have another in the queue dealing very particularly on this issue. And staff and I felt that getting policy direction of the board so that we could expedite those particular license applications, and we wouldn't need to wait to call the meeting of the Application Review and Special Programs Committee each time. Again, it was intended to do exactly what I think you'd like us to do, which is expedite those applications where we can and not have a policy interpretation limitation stand in the way. With that, I'd like to move to public comments. So Sean, if you could open the public comment.
Yes, and as Ms. Lawson pointed out earlier in the meeting, we've activated the Q&A window. You don't have to type a question in there, just type anything like yes, and we'll call on you in the order received. And we've also activated the raise hand feature at the bottom of the participants window. If you'd like to raise your hand, go ahead and click on that, and we'll call on you in the order received. First up here, we have Natalie Diaz. Natalie, are you there?
Hi, yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time today. I'm Natalie Diaz, and I'm with the California Primary Care Association. I wanted to thank this board for taking the time and making the efforts to discuss and resolve this important issue at hand that is here for residents who are getting ready to graduate in just a few weeks and are disadvantaged by the current licensing structure. This issue, like others we have shared in our letters, for example, the moonlighting and other pieces, are really, issues that are very real and impacting not only our physician workforce, but also our patient population. And, this year we see great impact, but next year we're really going to see even greater impact as those who are graduating this year. You see a mix of folks who have the unrestricted license that they obtained before the new licensing structure went into effect, and then of course those who have their PTL. But next year they all will have their PTL, and so these issues will become to an even greater extent if no action is taken. And so we really believe that this can't be a piecemealed approach that we take. A much greater resolution is needed. And so we have put forward, our suggestion is to adopt a hybrid model in which a resident would obtain the PTL upon entering their program, but then be eligible for the unrestricted license at 12 or 24 months, depending on whether they are a domestic or international medical graduate. And so for that reason, the hybrid model is really critical and one that we urge you to support and consider through AB 1156, which put forward that structure for consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Anne Fuqua. Anne, are you there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
When I've attended these meetings, it's usually been related to comments on pain management, and I had not realized actually that was not like there was nothing, there was no other other items on the agenda. But I think this issue is so incredibly important, that you're dealing with this evening. I had back in 2004 had developed a UTI that was just very, very ill, and had gone to an urgent care, and there was a physician who had completed his 1 year of internship the year before, and he was the only physician on duty, and I'd actually been in there like 2 days, basically 2 days in a row, just incredibly ill. And at that point, was again sending me home had it not been for the nurses that said, no, we need to, and even, I mean, actually before I was in a wheelchair, I actually was a nurse myself. I mean, when you're the one that's sick. sometimes you don't see how sick you actually are yourself. But thank God for, she, I said no, called an ambulance from this, urgent care facility and had me sent to an emergency room, and I was admitted with sepsis, and I would have gone home that night. But but just please make sure that these doctors that are graduating have the ability to start working once they finish their residency. That's only fair. That's what the public needs. That's what they deserve. And there's a way to do it, because as a nurse, I remember there was you applied very early, prior to graduation for your license, and you could get a temporary license that was in effect until you had passed boards, and I think most states have that, but there just should be some way to ensure that everyone is able to, they're able to work once they finish their program, but that they've also had this extra training, because people's lives are at stake.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Melissa Nosnickel. Melissa, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I'm the director of the family medicine residency at Natividad, which is in Salinas in Monterey County, where we're the county hospital. And I'm representing my own experience with going through the PTL process this year, and that of members of the California Residency Network, which makes up the majority of family medicine residency directors in California. And I'd like to speak about our experience with the leave of absence policy, and also the stipulation for 24 months in one program, which I think is also a problem. So as was described, I think our experience this year has been the board is working hard to address the issues of leaves of absence on a case-by-case basis. I had 3 graduating residents this year who had this issue affect their licensure, and they've just found out in the past few weeks whether and when they will get to graduate. The board did accept my recommendation that they had met the requirements. This year, however, the only graduating residents who were affected by this rule were those who had a PTL, which were only international medical graduates, because our US graduates for this year were able to get a full license before the PTL went into effect. And IMGs are a minority of residents in California. The work of processing leaves of absence on a case-by-case basis has taken us to within a couple weeks of graduation before we had final decisions on this. And that made it really difficult for those 3 graduates to make plans for relocating for their new jobs, signing contracts, for the hospital to think about additional pay for extending residency training. Our graduate medical education funding for family medicine is 36 months only. The hospital foots the bill thereafter for any funded slots. And next year, the floodgates will open when this affects all of our graduating residents who have taken a leave of absence, which is many residents that they're at their prime childbearing years when they go through residency. So there's a lot of leaves, both fathers and mothers. And so I agree with recognizing the residency director's determination that a resident has met the requirements for 36 months of training and not having to go through on a case-by-case basis, because I think that's going to be, it'll be tough to make that feasible next year when so many people are going to be dealing with that. My other concern is about the 24 months of continuous training in one residency program. Natividad sponsors a global health fellowship. And while at Natividad, our fellows serve the people of the Salinas Valley through clinical work at Natividad in our county clinics, and then they spend half of their time also in our partner site in Chiapas, Mexico, serving those communities. And we, this year, accepted a highly qualified graduating family medicine resident to begin fellowship in July, next month. She was refused eligibility for a California license under the current licensure law, which requires 24 months of residency in one program. Our fellow transferred from her first residency after 15 months due to her partner's serious health condition, who lived closer to his family. Okay, she could not then therefore complete 24 months at her second program. The analysts at the board said that there was no exception to the law, although she was granted an exception for board certification in family medicine, and we provided that letter to them. So there needs to be some allowance for residents who have extenuating circumstances and for reasons like hers do not complete 24 months in one residency. She's going out of state to a different fellowship, and we've lost a great primary care physician for the rest of her career that would have been in California most likely.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Katrina Reyes. Katrina, are you there?
I am, thank you. Good evening, board members. Katrina Reyes with the California Academy of Family Physicians. We appreciate the board's efforts to try to address the disproportionate impact caused by the new licensing timeframe on residents, particularly female residents who take medical or family leave. I shared an example at the last board meeting of a program in an underserved community that was expecting to hire a fellow from out of state who has been in excellent standing throughout her training. But because she did not meet California's strict time requirement for licensure due to medical leave, and because she is unable to extend her training due to the fact that the program does not have the funding for the additional time, she is unable to be licensed in California and is now seeking employment in other states rather than coming to serve in one of our underserved communities. We understand the medical board's desire to ensure the competency of physicians. Nobody is more committed to this goal than residency training programs and the directors of these programs. It is important to note that clinical competency committees and directors of residency training programs conduct ongoing evaluations of resident progress and ultimately a final determination of resident preparedness for autonomous practice. This solution is a piecemeal approach to solving the many issues that have arisen due to the postgraduate training license and the new licensing timeframe, including the inability of residents to bill while moonlighting. After years of trying to put a Band-Aid on a broken leg, we are at a point where we need a holistic solution, as we will continue to see more and more residents impacted by this, thereby exacerbating California's workforce shortage. A holistic approach has been put forward in Assembly Bill 1156, which is a hybrid model of the PTL and the previous licensing structure. This middle ground solution is one the medical board should and could support. Accordingly, we urge the medical board to support AB 1156 as a path forward to addressing the problems caused by the PTL and the new licensing timeframe. Thank you.
Thanks for your public comment. Next up, we have Kate Perkins. Kate, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. I am the Associate Dean for Graduate Medical Education at UCLA, and I speak on behalf of myself as well as my colleagues at the other UC Graduate Medical Education sponsoring campuses. There are 7 of us in total, and collectively we are responsible for oversight of training of around 5,000 residents and fellows in the state of California. I would summarize our concerns about the PTL in 3 broad categories, most of which have been touched on already this evening. The first is restricted practice, which negatively impacts patient care. The second is the logistic issues that have already been spoken about. And the third has to do with a pathway to address common legitimate interruptions in GME training. I'll focus on that last area since it's the area on the agenda tonight. I know I speak for my colleagues when we endorse strongly the proposal before you to accept program director certification of competency and completion of 36 months of postgraduate training. This would allow acknowledgement that leaves of absence for legitimate reasons can be accepted, and that training programs can certify competency and have that competency acknowledged by the board. But I would also like to address the so-called 24-month rule with you and exceptions to that rule. Like the previous speaker, we have had several examples of very well qualified individuals who have not been eligible for full and unrestricted licensure in our state after completing their training because they didn't complete 24 months of uninterrupted training. To give you 2 examples, we have individuals who were in programs that were closed back east and transferred to programs in the state of California and did not complete a full 24 months because of the closure of their ACGME accredited programs back east. We also have an individual who at the 23rd month of her training was diagnosed with a serious medical condition, had to leave her program and move to California in order to have her children cared for by her parents while she underwent chemotherapy, and she was unable to get a full license even though she completed 36 months of training. So in summary, some of our trainees may graduate eligible for board certification, but not for full and unrestricted license in our states because they don't complete the 24-month rule. And we would advocate for a process for considering on a case-by-case basis those individuals.
Thank you for your public comment.
And Sean, may I just interject with a question for staff on exactly the point from the previous commenter? My understanding is we do have a process for evaluating those individual circumstances on a case-by-case basis. That's the task of our Applications Review and Special Programs Committee. But perhaps Ms. Webb or Ms. O'Connor could speak to that.
Yeah, sure. Yes. So when there's an application that, you know, I guess I could qualify it as kind of unusual circumstances that, and I'll let Carrie correct me here, that, you know, doesn't seem to, you know, doesn't fit the requirements of the law, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to be the intent of the law to keep these folks from, you know, getting a license. And that it seems to be an issue that requires further discussion. You know, maybe you know, further review from the Application Review Committee. We can bring those applications to the committee for recommendation on how to proceed, and we have done that in the past.
Right. I'm recalling the scenario of the medical school that closed. I think it was in Pennsylvania. We have seen a number of applications from those, which the committee separately considered.
Yes, and there were actually, I don't remember the number, but there was at least one or two in that same meeting that didn't meet the 24-month requirement that the committee also reviewed. So we have brought those cases to the committee.
Right. Thank you, Ms. O'Connor. All right, Sean, let's take it back to public comment, please.
Okay, next up we have Matt Leahy, I believe. Matt, are you there?
Yes, this is Matt Leger with SEIU California, and we represent on behalf of the Committee of Interns and Residents about 6,000 residents across the state of California. They're all impacted by the issues related to PTL, which I think my colleagues and Dr. Thorpe very articulately outlined. Do want to support the motion in front of the board today because we want to ensure we're not losing additional physicians in California to other states. If we're training them here, let's make sure they stay here. But do want to urge the medical board to you know, continue to do the good work that the staff and board chair have been doing around the PTL issue, and want to make sure that that's addressed this year through AB 1156. So thank you so much, and that will be my comment.
Yeah, thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Kathleen Kearns. Kathleen, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to speak as well. I am Dr. Kathleen Kearns. I'm the Residency Program Director for Family Medicine in Modesto, California. Echoing the comments of my colleague, Dr. California Rounds. Kind of calling to tell the story of my resident who couldn't call in. She's actually driving right now. The class of 2022 who took a parental leave related to
Ms. Kearns?
COVID-19.
Are you on a mobile device?
Yes.
Or are you able to, maybe if you could get closer to your access point or something with a better signal? We're losing your audio in and out. We'll go ahead and reset the timer and see if we can.
Sorry to hear that. No, I'm sitting in front of my desktop computer. So sorry about that. I guess I'll be brief. I'm again showing my support for the motion that's on the table as well as the new assembly bill, because I think that the program director should be able to attest to the 36 months of credit and to be in line with the American Board of Family Medicine leave policy. There's not going to be residents doing 32, 33 months of training and graduating out. It's not possible. We still have to have them meeting the minimum requirements set by the ACGME and the ABFM as far as their minimum number of weeks and patient encounters. So there will be a difference of 4, maybe 8 weeks at most, and the program director should be able to attest to that so that the resident can be eligible for licensure. I'm not sure if you can
Thank
hear
you.
me, so I'll stop there.
It sounded a lot better there. If you got at least another minute, if you have anything else to say. I'm sorry, just initially we were losing you in and out.
Oh, I can also say that I'm definitely in favor of reverting back to the opportunity to apply for full unrestricted license during residency. I've been in residency for 15 years under that system before, and there was not a preponderance of residents dropping out of residency and becoming licensed board ineligible physicians. There was not a huge problem with that. And yet the new model is causing all the difficulties that have been mentioned by my colleagues. So I'm in favor of the proposal in front of you tonight, and also in general in favor of reverting to the old license form.
Thank you again for your public comment. At this time, Ms. Lawson, I do not see any additional requests in queue.
All right, thank you, Sean. We'll bring it back to the board for further discussion on the motion that's on the table, or any additional questions.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Please, Mr. Reed.
I don't know if staff or maybe one of the other doctors on the commission could answer it, but what's the reason for the 24-month continuous service? Ms.
Weber, Ms. O'Connor?
Yes, I can answer that. It's to have the residents stay within one program so that any deficiencies can be identified and remediated. Otherwise, they may go from program to program without a length of period where the problem can be, like I said, identified and remediated.
Okay, thank you. You know, I know as it was presented earlier, we're very limited in scope of what we're doing today, just considering the amendment. But you know, as a former author and champion of paid parental leave, I'm wondering the motion that was put forth earlier today by I forgot which commissioner it was, but is that the most flexible that we can be? I mean, is there any other more flexibility we could provide, especially for the 24-month rule? Because as some of the examples that were brought up, like the doctor from Salinas and others, is there any kind of, I know it's the law, so we're very limited in what we could do, but is there any additional amendment we could add to give a little bit more flexibility?
This is Carrie, and I can say that, again, that this is based on attestation. And so, for example, with regard to the postgraduate training program that closed and those residents had to move to other programs, some of those program directors attested that they were granted the 24 months of credit in the same program because they applied leave to their own program and indicated that it met that requirement. So this does have flexibility in that regard. It is specified in the law that it's a requirement, and so we're limited on this date as to what can be done. But again, we do have the application review committee that where appropriate, staff brings it to them for review.
So, because I was looking in the chat box. So basically the law says you need 24-month continuous. So there's nothing around that, right? The program director would have to attest that the person did fulfill the 24 continuance month program.
They'd have to attest that they received credit for that.
They received credit for that, okay. But and I think our chair, Ms. Lawson, stated that if there is extenuating circumstances like a medical school closed down or their previous program closed down, that would be taken into consideration?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in full support of the amendment that is before us because obviously I think one of the other callers called in and said that this is the usually interns, this is the prime of their life, and and paid parental leave policy does disproportionately affect women more than men, but we are doing full pay parental, whether it's men or women. So we want to make sure that that does not affect against them in their careers. So I am very supportive of this. I agree with Dr. Thorpe and everyone else who is more versed in these issues, where they stated there needs to be a lot more reforms, and I am looking forward to working on that. And last question is AB 1156. Will that come before us on a later date, and will we get more information on that?
Thanks, Mr. Rook. Could I actually ask Mr. Bone to just provide, I mean, in response to your question, a status as to AB 1156, which I think went into print just a couple of days ago, and so therefore not in time for us to add it to our agenda today. But Mr. Bone, are you available to just provide an update on the status and what the process will be for that, and when we might have an opportunity to consider it as a board?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to. Yes, so the bill right now is over in the Senate. It looks like it is pending a referral to committee. So the typical pathway for a bill like this is that it would go to the Senate Business and Professions Committee next for consideration. It doesn't appear that that has occurred yet, most likely because the bill previously was had to do with a completely unrelated topic. So the next board meeting right now is scheduled for August 19 and 20. So unless there was some other meeting that was agenda or was calendared prior to that, that would be the next time that the board would be able to, have a discussion and on that topic.
Thank you. And is that in that would still likely be prior to its approval, but perhaps not prior to a committee hearing?
Well, if we're going to follow the typical rules, or rather assume that the legislature is going to, follow the typical rules, then that would be after, most likely, a policy committee hearing. Might be before our board meeting, would likely be before the it was taken up by the full Senate and then the Assembly respectively, but it would be towards the tail end, I guess I would say, of the legislative process.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rue, I'll kick it back to you. That was your question, and I asked Mr. Bone to interject, make sure you got your question answered.
No, yeah, sure. I guess August 19th, the next meeting is when we'll hear more about AB 1156 and possibly take action. So that was my question.
Yeah, I think I will say there's the possibility, at least, that we would call a special meeting that's not currently on the books as of 6 p.m. today, but there's the possibility we might call a special meeting on those issues in the interim. Any additional comments or questions from board members?
Yeah, Madam Chair, just to answer Mr. Rue's thing.
Please.
This was we took this through the last sunset. We are finding out, David, actually what are the problems it caused. I think that within this proposal today, it gives a policies change for our staff to handle problems, and I have no doubt we, at least this board member who took that, will be supporting some kind of modification, but that's it. That's in the future.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions? All right, hearing none, I think we'll move to a roll call vote. Ms. Caldwell?
Mr. Brooks, Ms. Campoverde, Dr. Gonadev,
Aye.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Dr. Kraus,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Dr. Lewis, Ms. Lubiano, Dr. Mahmood,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Thorpe,
Yes.
Mr. Watkins,
Yes.
Dr. Yip.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion carries, and the postgraduate training license interpretation has been approved. Members, please remute your computers. Our final agenda item is item 3, adjournment. And there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you to everyone for participating in today's meeting. We will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Lawson.
Thank you.
See you on August 19th.